All right, welcome back for another lecture. So today we're going to look at chapter 26, looking at the anatomy of the urinary system and the kidney for focus. And part 2 will be more on the physiology. So welcome back again, everybody, on this beautiful day, and streaming live from my house again, streaming to all Bio 153 students throughout the Tri-Cities and the thumb of Michigan and up in northern Michigan. So hello to all. So today we're going to learn about the urinary system. So here we go. All right, so this first slide here, this is kind of an overview of the various organs of the urinary system. So we can kind of see that here. So some of these various organs we can see. Of course, a good place to start is probably the kidneys. So when we think of the urinary system, we're always thinking about the kidneys right here. And the position of the kidneys are interesting. So you can see here that the right kidney is slightly lower than the left. So right kidney is slightly lower than the left kidney. And the rationale for that is because of the position of where your liver is. So we can kind of see that here. Here's the left kidney. Here is the right kidney. So something you can kind of see. Of course, the kidneys are very critical for filtering of blood. So kidneys filter about 180 liters of fluid through the bloodstream in a 24-hour period. And ultimately, the kidneys are critical for urine formation. You need at least one kidney to survive. It's nice to have two, of course. But sometimes, for one reason or another, kidney failure, you have one removed, or you go ahead and donate a kidney, you need at least one for survival. Another very critical part here of just major organs of the urinary system, you'll see we have the adrenal gland. And the adrenal glands are right here. They're situated on top of your kidney here. There's a lot of various hormones that are produced in the adrenal gland. So hormones such as epinephrine, norepinephrine, a lot of various corticosteroids are produced there. There's even a little bit of testosterone and estrogen that's produced in the adrenal glands too. So other important organs, we've mentioned the kidneys, but we also have the ureters. And the ureters are extremely important. They transport the urine from the kidneys to your bladder. So literally, the urine is going this way, it's leaving your kidney here, going down the ureter, and ultimately continuing on to the bladder. So they're very thin tubes, these ureters, transporting again the urine from the kidney to the bladder. And then here we have your bladder, urinary bladder. And the bladder is going to be your temporary storage tank for urine until eventually you urinate and the urine goes out of your urethra. So bladder here, and urethra would be right here. And so this is kind of the basis of the urinary system, which we're going to be focusing in learning in here today. So kidneys are critical for survival. Again, you need to at least have one kidney to live. Without it, if you don't have any kidneys, you're going to die. So you need at least one kidney. So here's a lovely picture right here of a human kidney. And what we're seeing here now are the important functions that kidneys play a role in your body. So for one, number one, kidneys are important for the removal of toxins. So toxins from maybe alcohol or drug use if someone's taking drugs, if they're taking marijuana, or maybe they're taking cocaine, or whatever the drug might be. Important removal of toxins. Likewise, metabolic waste products. So maybe some of these metabolic waste products would be such as urea. We mentioned that in the last chapter. Urea is built up from protein metabolism, and we eventually get rid of that through urination. Maybe it's abundance of excess hydrogen ions that might build up from pH being altered in the blood. Maybe it's buildup of other things such as creatine, possibly creatine. So a lot of different metabolic waste products in that regard. I mentioned the idea of hydrogen ions, so ions from the blood right here, important functions. The kidney also serves an important function when it comes to regulation of blood volume in the body, proper chemical composition, and also proper pH of the blood when it comes to the idea of acid-base balance. What is that actual pH of arterial blood or venous blood? And we'll get into more of an understanding of acid-base balance in our chapter on chemistry in the weeks to come. The kidneys also serve an important process function when it comes to blood pressure regulation. So is that blood pressure increasing? Is it decreasing? So that's very important as well. Ultimately, the response to the change in blood pressure leads to the release of what's known as renin. So renin is a very important enzyme that's released. So very, very important here. And then finally, another important function for kidneys is red blood cell production. So when, again, someone slips into a state of tissue hypoxia, the response is the kidneys release erythropoietin, EPO. So that very, very important hormone there, EPO, erythropoietin, that we mentioned way back in our chapter on blood. So important to be aware of the functions that kidneys serve in our body, and you can see why they're so critical for our survival. All right, this view here, this is an overall cross-sectional view that we're looking down at the kidneys. And around the kidneys, you have several different supportive tissue layers. And we can see the big three here. So the outermost layer of protection around the kidneys is known as the renal fascia. The renal fascia. And the renal fascia will anchor the kidneys in place and adrenal gland to surrounding structures. So that's the outermost supportive tissue layer. The next layer, the middle layer, number 2, this is known as the perorenal fat capsule. So you do have a little bit of a fatty mass for protection around the kidneys to cushion it against a blow. So anytime you get hit down in that area, you have some protection. Of course, when you think of boxers, I think of, the classic Rocky Balboa, and with boxers, you get a lot of blows to the kidneys, and it's very, very painful if you've ever been hit in the kidneys before. And then the most internal layer here, number 3, is known as the fibrous capsule or the renal capsule. And this is a very thin, transparent layer, kind of a sheath almost. Transparent mean you can see through, and ultimately prevents infections from actually entering into the kidney itself. So these are considered the three main supportive tissue layers: the renal fascicle, the outermost layer; number 2, the perirenal fat capsule; and number 3, the fibrous capsule. So very important to make sure that you know your three basic layers. Okay, it's also critical to know the direction of urine flow through the kidney. This is something that's illustrated in the homework assignment. So we'll go ahead and we'll run through this. So first we start by looking at urine in the renal cortex. The renal cortex of the kidney, we can see here, this is considered to be the outermost region of your kidney. So all this area right here would be the renal cortex, the outermost region of the kidney here. This regional area right here. The urine then will flow from the renal cortex eventually into number 2 here, known as the renal medulla. The renal medulla, right here. The renal medulla is the inner region of your kidney. So it's more internal, this area here. And ultimately then extends around like this innermost region of the kidney, renal medulla. And the renal medulla is the region, but it contains several structures in the vicinity. One type of structure is known as the renal pyramids. The renal pyramids. And these are pyramid-like structures, like right here and right here. They look like pyramids, or maybe they look like ancient leaves from the Jurassic period of when dinosaurs roamed the earth. But these are the pyramids here that you see, and they're found within this region known as the renal medulla. Urine then will eventually then make its way into number 3, what's known as a minor calyx. A minor calyx. So minor calyx right here. The minor calyx is going to be this kind of duct area right here. That's a minor calyx. Here's a minor calyx. Here's a minor calyx. So you kind of get the point here. Minor calyx, minor calyx, minor calyx, minor calyx. And then from there, the urine will flow into number 4, and this is known as a major calyx. So urine goes from a minor calyx to a major calyx. So major calyx, so urine flows into this area here. So urine goes from the minor calyxes into this major calyx vicinity here. Likewise, right here, we have a major calyx as well. Then the urine flows into number 5, which is known as the renal pelvis. So renal pelvis. So this large area here would be the vicinity of the renal pelvis. So urine goes into that. And eventually then the urine flows out. You have a little bit of the renal pelvis that extends out of the kidney. The urine then going into the ureter, number 6. So this area here would be your ureter. So ureter. And the urine then goes down that ureter and eventually into what we've seen already, number 7, the urinary bladder. And then the urine goes into the urethra. So very important to make sure you know the direction of urine flow through the kidney. So definitely make sure to study that. It's really important that you know this. All right, the next thing we're going to take a look at here today is looking at the direction of blood flow through the kidney. So you might be like, oh, I thought we were all done with looking at blood flow. We already had our blood vessel chapter and our chapter on the cardiac system and heart. But yeah, we do need to know blood flow as well. So some of these blood vessels we've already learned from previous practicals, but there's some additional ones that you need to know here. So of course we start with the aorta. So near the kidney, you'd have the abdominal aorta, and that's what this aorta portion would be. And then, of course, the blood flows into the renal artery. So renal artery. And of course, arteries are carrying oxygen-rich blood, right? And then we start to have a lot of branching that occurs. So after that, then we have what's known as the segmental artery, and then interlobar artery. And these are getting smaller and smaller. Arcuate artery. And then the last artery is the cortical radiate artery, which are pretty small. And then the blood flow will leave an artery and will go into what's known as an afferent arteriole. Afferent arteriole. So remember, arterioles, they're pretty tiny. Before eventually the blood, oxygen-rich, makes its way into the glomerulus. So the glomerulus is a very unique type of capillary set. They're going to be very critical when it comes to eventually forming of what's known as filtrate, which is in the nephron. So these capillaries here, the glomerulus, are very unique because you actually don't have any gas exchange that takes place here. Instead, like I mentioned, they're going to be very important when it comes to materials within these capillaries that are small enough are able to leave and enter into a nephron. Into a nephron. So a nephron, spell that out, N-E-P-H-R-O-N. The nephron, we'll see this soon, is defined as the structural and functional unit of the kidney itself. And so you have a lot of materials that leave the glomerulus here and form what's known as filtrate. So that's kind of important to remember, the filtrate. Filtrate. Okay, so filtrate. We'll talk more about that later on today. The oxygen-rich blood will continue on into what's known as the efferent arteriole before eventually the oxygen-rich blood will enter into these two unique capillaries here, known as the tubular capillaries and vasa recta capillaries. So these capillaries here are similar to what we learned previous about our understanding of capillaries. This is where the actual gas exchange will occur, okay? So actual gas exchange. So this is actually taking place here where you have actual gas exchange occurring. Oh, and I ran out of room. Well, we'll put the G and E here. So gas exchange, right? So the gas exchange of course, oxygen, gas, and carbon dioxide gas. So the oxygen, of course, here will go into cells within the tissue of the kidney here, and the CO2 will be collected and will be brought back into the capillaries. So oxygen gas will leave the capillaries, go into the tissues of the kidneys themselves, and carbon dioxide gas will come into the capillaries here. So from here on out, now we're all oxygen poor blood vessels, veins. And there aren't as many veins as there are arteries. But what's kind of cool is the fact that you have the same names. So cortical radiate vein, we had a cortical radiate artery. And then blood flow will make its way into an arcuate vein before going into an interlobar vein, and then eventually to the renal vein, which you have learned that already. So that's going to be the biggest vein coming out of the kidney. And then the oxygen poor blood will make its way into the inferior vena cava. So this is kind of important to review, especially when it comes to learning the structures of the models here. So definitely make sure to take a look at this and spend some time reviewing this. All right, now it's a matter of looking at the nephron. And the nephron, very important to know, the nephron, see down here, nephron is the structural and functional unit of the kidney. And you have approximately 1 million nephrons per kidney. So if you have 2 kidneys and you've lived a pretty healthy life, you may have around 2 million nephrons that are operating to form filtrate. So there are several different parts to the nephron here, and we'll run through this. So before we get to the nephron, we can see here in this illustration, we mentioned all those blood vessels again. Well, this picture kind of shows the smallest of the oxygen-rich blood vessels, which is the afferent arteriole. So blood is going to be transferred through the afferent arteriole eventually into this cluster of capillaries here, which is known as the glomerulus. So the glomerulus then is a network of capillaries, which are important ultimately for forming of filtrate. And that filtrate will continue into the nephron. Blood supply will continue on, still oxygen rich, but the blood will go into what's known as an efferent arteriole. An efferent arteriole. So now the filtrate will make its way into what's known as the glomerular capsule. And this is the capsule right here that surrounds the glomerulus, the capillaries that are red. The same term, glomerular capsule, is also known as the Bowman's capsule. So Bowman's capsule. Ooh, well, you get the idea here. Bowman's capsule. It's actually right down here too for you, so there you go. If we take these two terms together, the glomerular capsule and the glomerulus, then we look at the term known as the renal corpuscle. Renal corpuscle. So renal corpuscle is incorporating the glomerular capsule with the glomerulus itself. From here, the filtrate, again now in the Bowman's capsule, will make its way down this twisted coiled structure, and this is known as the proximal convoluted tubulo. Proximal convoluted tubulo. And then the filtrate will go down and make its way into what's known as the loop of Henle. The loop of Henle. The loop of Henle is made up of two major sections here. This is all the loop of Henle here. Okay, so loop of Henle here. There's the descending limb and the ascending limb. This portion right here, from here to here, would be the descending limb, because you must go down before you go up. So you go down for the ride first, and that's the descending limb. And then when you go up right here, this is the ascending limb. All right here is the ascending limb. And again, this is the loop of Henle. The loop of Henle. From here, the filtrate will make its way up this ascending limb of the loop of Henle into a new structure of the nephron, this twisted coiled structure known as the distal convoluted tubulo. Distal convoluted tubulo, the DCT. And then the filtrate finally will exit into this structure, yellow and vertical, and this is the collecting duct. So this structure here, here to here, this is the collecting duct. So you actually have a lot of nephrons, thousands of them, that are actually connected to a single collecting duct. And so you have lots of filtrate, which is actually pouring right into a collecting duct. And once the filtrate enters into the collecting duct, for the first time, we no longer say it's filtrate anymore. we are forming now urine. We are forming urine. Okay, so urine is formed in the collecting duct. That's where we form our urine. So very important to know your nephron. Definitely practice writing that out. Of course, you never know. We might have a practice a little later. You just got to see. Okay, there are two major types of nephrons in the kidney. The first type here we have is known as the cortical nephron. Okay, so we'll focus on that first, cortical nephron. How we can compare and contrast between this nephron type are a couple ways. One, the cortical nephron has a short loop of Henle, okay? A very short loop of Henle, this nephron type. This is being illustrated here. Here we have a very short loop of Henle that only projects a little bit away from the regional area known as the renal cortex, that outer region of the kidney. Just a little bit protrudes into the renal medulla region here. So that's one characteristic of cortical nephrons. Secondly, are the capillary types associated. And with the cortical nephron, you're going to have what are known as petubular capillaries. Okay, petubular capillaries. So petubular capillaries is the capillary type associated with the cortical nephron. And again, this entire structure here is your cortical nephron. When it comes to the amount of cortical nephrons in the kidney, roughly about 85% of your nephrons are classified as cortical nephrons. And again, I mentioned petubular capillaries are going to be associated with this nephron type. The other type of nephron that you're going to have here are known as the jugular medullary nephron. So that's always a fun one to say. Jugular medullary nephron. That's our other nephron type. They make up 15% of the nephrons in your kidney, these jugular medullary nephrons. So, two types, cortical nephron and the jugular medullary nephron. The characteristics of the jugular medullary nephron is that they have a very long loop of Henle. So the loop of Henle is going to protrude and go very, very deep into the renal medulla region. Okay. So very long loop of Henle here. And then the capillary type associated are the vasa recta. So vasa recta capillaries. Okay, so vasa recta capillaries. So vasa recta. So this image here in the purple is representing the vasa recta capillaries. So they're kind of in very close proximity to that long loop of Henle. These nephron types too, the jugular medullary nephrons, are critical when it comes to production of concentrated urine. So they're going to play a very important role ultimately when it comes to overall movement of water and salt. Okay, they're going to play a very important role when it comes to ultimate movement of water, H2O, and salt, sodium chloride. So they're going to play a very critical role in regards to overall reabsorption or release of these two critical items. So very important for proper balance in the body, homeostasis of water and salt. So again, make sure to know your two major nephron types. Now, what we're doing here is we're zooming in on where the glomerulus would be, and likewise the Bowman's capsule. And on top of the glomerulus, you have what are known as the podocytes or the podocytes. These yellow structures here represent the podocytes, or again, some people say that they're podocytes, depending on who you talk to. So, two different ways to pronunciate the term. And these podocytes cover the glomerular capillaries. They're very highly modified, branching epithelial cells, and ultimately are going to help with overall filtration, forming filtrate again. So that term that I've mentioned previously, the idea of the filtrate. Filtrate. The podocytes are made up of several structures. They have a cell body. They have these cytoplasmic extensions. They even have foot processes. And most importantly, they have filtration slits. So again, materials that are small enough in the glomerulus are able to leave the glomerulus and slide through the filtration slits, forming filtrate, now in your Bowman's capsule. Now we're in the actual nephron. Here's a picture, very close up with the microscope, looking at the podocytes again. And they're very critical when it comes to glomerular filtration, ultimately forming filtrate. Like we've mentioned, there's some very important parts of the podocyte, the cell body. So here's a picture of the cell body here. Foot processes, these are foot processes here. And also the filtration slits, pretty critical here, because again, materials that are small enough to leave the glomerular capillaries will go past these filtration slits and enter into the Bowman's capsule, now part of the nephron itself. All right, so imagine having lots of various materials in your blood. And the capillary here is referring to, again, the glomerulus. So glomerular capillaries. So the pink here is representing the glomerulus, just so we have a good point of reference here for you. So here we have the glomerulus. So within this area, you're going to have a lot of items in the blood. You're going to have water in the blood. You're going to have various solutes. And some of these solutes would be represented by a lot of your nutrients like glucose, amino acids, lipids referring to the fat, vitamins, some salt, ions, and even other stuff. The majority of these items are able to leave the glomerulus, and they're able to leave through these capillaries because this capillary type has the fenestrations, pores. So these various materials go through the fenestrations, pores, and are now into the podocyte and can go through the filtration slits of the podocyte, which would be kind of like right here, and ultimately now continue on and are a part of the nephron, forming filtrate in the nephron of the Bowman's capsule. So a lot of various items will do that. However, there are two major items that typically will stay in the blood, in the glomerulus, and continue on to the efferent arteriole. These two major items are known as the plasmaproteins and your erythrocytes, red blood cells. Based off their molecular size, these items will stay in the blood and continue on through the bloodstream. So very important to be aware of that. Those are the two major items that stay in the bloodstream, the plasmaproteins and the red blood cells of the erythrocytes. Okay, and again, the yellow area here is representing the podocyte. All right, another structure that we kind of find around the nephron is what's known as the jugular glomerular complex, or the jugular glomerular apparatus. So the complex is referring to this area, kind of right here. So kind of referring to this area right here is referring to this idea of the complex right here. So that's known as the jugular glomerular complex. And within this complex are a variety of different cells, which play a very important function in the body. We're going to focus today on looking at the granular cells of this complex, at least on this slide. So the granular cells here are critical because they sense changes in your blood pressure, okay? And by doing so, this leads to the release of the enzyme known as renin. And this is very important when it comes to blood pressure regulation. Is your blood pressure increasing? Is your blood pressure decreasing? So that's extremely important. And where we find these granular cells, we find them along the lining of your afferent arteriole. So this is your afferent arteriole here. So that's where we find these granular cells, right here. And granular cells are also found along the lining of your efferent arteriole, which would be right here, efferent arteriole. So that's where you find the granular cells. So along the lining of the afferent arteriole and along the lining of the efferent arteriole. And they sense changes in your blood pressure, which is extremely important. Okay? So that's what they do, these granular cells. They sense changes in blood pressure. That is their important function. Once again, we're focusing in on this jugular glomerular complex. We've already talked about on the previous slide of the function of the granular cells, but now we're going to pay our attention to understanding of the macula densa cells. So the macula densa cells, their important function is they sense changes in the salt content, sodium chloride content of the filtrate. And we find these cells along the lining of the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. So we kind of get a good picture of that here, where we find these macula densa cells. So macula densa cells, and they are literally right here, kind of in the purple. These are the macula densa cells right here, and these cells are right along the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. Again, they're important, these macula densa cells, for sensing changes in your salt content. Do you have a high salt content? Do you have a low salt content? Well, they're able to detect that in the filtrate. So very, very important, this concept. So make sure to know the function of the macula densa cells and make sure you know the function of the granular cells. And again, these cells make up the jugular glomerular complex. Again, the complex is referring to this area right here. So definitely make sure to know this. All right, it's iClicker time. So it's time to review some of these important concepts. So number one, I figure, hey, how about we'll start with some histology, as you might see some on your practical exam over the urinary system. So the below arrow number one is pointing to a blank, which is found in a nephron. So the below arrow in blue is pointing to a blank, which is found in the nephron. So, any ideas what this structure might be? All right, so the answer here should be letter B. So letter B is the correct answer. This arrow is pointing to a glomerulus. So this entire structure here, this is a glomerulus right here. And the white area surrounding it would be the Bowman's capsule. So very good. Number two, some more histology. The below image is showing what region of the kidney? The below image is showing what region of the kidney? So what region would this be? Of course, a good hint is, if you look at that image, you see a lot of glomeruli there. Glomeruli is plural for glomerulus, term for singular. Okay, and the answer here, I would probably go with choice letter C. This picture is showing the renal cortex, because in the renal cortex, this is the outer layer of the kidney, and you're going to find a lot of glomeruli there. And of course, the Bowman's capsule surrounding it, so then the term renal corpuscle. Plus, the fibrous capsule is this outermost layer of the kidney right here. So, very good. Number 3, urine flows from the major calyx to the blank. So what structure does the urine flow into next? What structure does the urine flow into next? Okay, so the correct answer here for number 3, urine flows from the major calyx to letter D, the renal pelvis. So renal pelvis is the correct answer. So again, definitely make sure to review this, right? Again, if we're talking about the major calyx, we're talking right here, renal pelvis right here, then into the ureter. Previous to that, of course, up here's the renal cortex, renal medulla, minor calyx, into major calyx, and then of course renal pelvis, and so on and so forth. Number 4 for review. The blank are a part of the jugular-glomerular complex and are located along the afferent and efferent arterioles. They sense changes in blank with the assistance of the enzyme renin. So, what would be the correct answer here? What would be the correct answer here? All right, so the correct answer here would be choice letter, should be C, the granular cells. The granular cells. Our clue, why this is the case? Because granular cells are located along the lining of the afferent arteriole and the efferent arteriole, responding to changes in blood pressure because of the release of the enzyme renin. All right, so what I'd like you to do at home, very good practice for you, is to draw a diagram of the nephron. So maybe you have some colored pencils at home or a marker, and you can go ahead and draw that. You guys know already that your artistic skills are much better than mine, and so I want you to go ahead and work on that drawing. What you also want to do is identify each structure based on the number. So definitely work on this activity here. So give yourselves a couple minutes to do that. And hopefully your drawing's coming along. Again, I'm sure it's amazing. Just wait till you get to see my drawing. I'm going to attempt a drawing too a little later. So it should be pretty sweet. All right, so I'm going to go through the answers here with you. Again, you might still be working on this, but I'm going to go ahead and go through this. And then I'm going to actually draw it myself, the nephron. So the first couple numbers here are referring to actual blood vessels. So number 1 is actually referring to an artery, and the name of this artery is known as the arcuate artery. So arcuate artery. Pretty small artery overall. This is number 1 here. And this artery actually lines the top of the renal pyramids. And when I think of an arc, you know, that you have architecture in front of a courthouse or city hall building. Number 2 is another artery. So this is referring to the cortical. So cortical. Radiate. Oops, supposed to be a T. Cortical, radiate. Artery. That's number 2. And again, if you can't read the handwriting, you'll find the actual terms themselves in the PowerPoint notes. All right, number 3, another oxygen-rich blood vessel, but now the blood has left the arteries, and now we're into the actual arteriole. So number 3 here, we'll write it over here. This is going to be your afferent. So A before E, chronological order. So we have here the afferent arteriole. So afferent arteriole. So that's going to refer to number 3. All right, 4A. This is the glomerulus. Okay, so this is the glomerulus right here, 4A, the network of capillaries. So the blood supply goes into these capillaries next. So that's 4A, the glomerulus, for 4A. 4B then, blood supply will then go into, leaving those capillaries into the efferent arteriole. So here's the efferent arteriole. Again, referring to 4B. So efferent arteriole. So ART. Ooh, ERIOLE. Efferent arteriole, 4B. Again, 4A was the glomerulus. So that's the glomerulus there. Number 5, the answer here would be the Bowman's capsule, or the glomerular capsule. Number 6, right here. So the filtrate leaves your Bowman's capsule. Number 5, this twisted coiled structure is number 6. So this is the proximal convoluted tubulo. Number 7, we now enter the loop of Henle. This is the descending limb because there's 2 limbs to the loop of Henle. So number 7, this is the descending limb of the loop of Henle. Number 8, the filtrate's going up. So this is the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. So 7 was descending limb of the loop of Henle. And number 8 is the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. And then number 9 is the distal convoluted tubulo, this twisted coiled area here, before eventually the filtrate dumps into the collecting duct, this long yellow vertical structure. And then once all the filtrate enters in here for the first time, the filtrate, we can define this now as our urine, and number 10, the collecting duct. Okay, so definitely, again, strongly recommend to draw this out, to have your visual. It's very important that you know the parts of the nephron, and important to know how early on blood supply makes its way into those glomerular capillaries ultimately, and how the filtrate runs through the nephron. So definitely spend some time reviewing this. This is extremely important to know, especially when we get into our second half of our notes over the urinary kidney physiology, nephron physiology. You just got to know this. So really important to study this, draw it out, know every single part. All right, now it's my turn to draw. So what I'm drawing here again is what you guys just did, which is the nephron. Again, this isn't going to look pretty, but we'll take it one step at a time. You guys always have better handwriting than me. Again, I failed handwriting in grade school, so I'll do my best here for you. So here we are, making the nephron, like so. Here's our twisted coiled part here of the nephron. And we're going down. And here we have that next twisted coiled part. And here we have our vertical part here of the nephron. Not bad, huh? Guess we'll take it. We got a winner. All right, so I'm just focusing on the nephron parts here. Okay, that's my focus here for you guys, is I'm focusing on those nephron parts. So again, right in the middle here, these network of capillaries forming filtrate, because that's the goal of the nephron, forming filtrate again. So we'll write that word over here to the side again, filtrate. We're forming that because right smack dab in the middle of the renal corpuscle, we have those really unique capillaries there known as the glomerulus. All right, surrounding the glomerulus, we have here the Bowman's capsule. This is supposed to be a B, believe it or not. So, Bowman's capsule. And then this twisted coiled area here represents the proximal convoluted tubulo. Now, for space purposes, I'm just going to give the abbreviation, but I expect you guys to write out the full word here. So, abbreviation PCT represents the proximal convoluted tubulo. Again, I expect you to write out the full word for me on a practical or even a quiz. So very important to make sure to know that. Again, for space purposes, I kind of ran out of room. I guess that's my lame excuse. The next part here, when the filtrate leaves the proximal convoluted tubulo, we then have right here the loop of Henle. And remember, there's two parts to that, right? This part going down here, that's known as the descending limb. So we have our descending limb here. Because first you must go down before you can go up. And of course the filtrate goes around the bottom, goes up. So this section over here then would be the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. And then this twisted coiled part here would be your distal convoluted tubulo. And again, for space, I don't want to make sure I didn't run out of room. This is an abbreviation for the distal convoluted tubulo here, the DCT. And then finally the filtrate enters into, again, this yellow vertical structure here. And this long structure, you have thousands of nephrons dumping their filtrate into what's known as the collecting duct. Okay? So the collecting duct. I have collect duct, but I ran out of room, but it should be collecting duct. Okay? Collecting duct. So collecting, C-O-L-L-E-C-T-I-N-G, and then duct. All right, so recap here again. We have the glomerulus here, these glomerular capillaries, items that are small enough will go past the filtration. The fenestration pores on the glomerulus past the podocytes, filtration slits, forming filtrate in the nephron. And then, so we're right here in the Bowman's capsule. This capsule surrounds your glomerulus. So, all right, this will probably work a little better. So here's your glomerulus. Here's your Bowman's capsule. It surrounds the glomerulus where the filtrate would be. Then we slip into the PCT, the proximal convoluted tubulo. This is this twisted coiled structure. The filtrate will go down the loop of Henle here. First, the descending limb, because you first must go down. You wrap around the bottom of the loop of Henle. You then go up the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. And then you go into the distal convoluted tubulo right here. This is a twisted coiled structure here. And then the filtrate slips into your collecting duct here, where we form urine. Okay? So that's where we form our urine. Right? This is where it becomes urine for the first time, is in the collecting duct here. So very important to build your foundation of anatomy here. You have to know the structure, because next time we're going to be looking at the physiology. I'm going to be going off of this and talking about items that are leaving in particular parts of the nephron here. And so it's extremely important to make sure you have this down. And definitely by practicing it, writing it out, you should be good to go. Obviously, these parts are all critical to know on the practical exam, or definitely for a lecture exam for sure, like exam 3. So really important to make sure to have this down. All right, so that's it for now. And until next time, we will see you. So have a wonderful day.